Hello and welcome to this review of my Gateway 2000 AnyKey keyboard. I got this one off of eBay in very good condition. It was $55, which is fairly cheap for an AnyKey, let alone such a clean one, but it's still more than I would have liked to have spent. Apparently these are somewhat costly most of the time. The Gateway AnyKey is one of the classic battlecruiser keyboards, the others being the Northgate AnyKey, Focus FK9000 and FK9200, Ortec MCK142 Pro, and Cherry G80-2100. There are others of course, but these are the most well-known vintage ones, and the AnyKey is the last one to be reviewed, all the others I've already looked at. There will also be a future video where I do a direct, detailed comparison between all of them, as they're all quite different. Like most other battlecruiser keyboards from the time, it includes some extra features which again differed from board to board. One very common feature was the addition of these diagonal keys, which I'm sure was useful in the DOS era, but nowadays is, in my opinion, actually worse than just a standard T-nav. The other special feature on this board is also very common. It has programmable keys for entering macros. This is so common that it's basically a hallmark for battlecruisers. In addition to the standard 12 F keys on top, there's another 12 on the left here that you can reprogram. Some, like the Focus 9000, 9200 and the Northgate AnyKey, have 12 dedicated macro keys, and the Cherry MX2100 and Ortec 142 both have 24. However, unlike all the other boards, the AnyKey, as its name subtly implies, is fully programmable. In other words, you can program any key, apart from the programming keys themselves and the lock keys. So if you must have the spacebar put out "fuck you" instead, you can. This is probably quite useful if you're in regular correspondence with a government entity, for example. Also, unlike the other boards, there is no set limit to how many characters you can program per key. For example, with the Focus 9000, you could program up to 14 keystrokes per key, minus an extra one for each modifier, which is really not all that much. The AnyKey, however, uses a shared memory pool of 16 kilobits, which I think is equal to 2048 characters, but please correct me if I'm wrong on that. Anyway, that means you can program the entire memory into a single key, or spread it out over multiple keys on a board, which is much more effective and economical than a set character limit per key, I think. The way it works is that you press Program Macro, then the key you want to program, then the string you want, and you finish by pressing Program Macro again. Nice, simple and easy, and no drivers or external software required, simply exactly what it needs to be and do and nothing else. I used it for a week with some simple things programmed into both sets of F keys, with the exception of this F5 key which I used for page refresh in Chrome. I mostly used it for product codes, budget allocations, location codes, etc., such as 542-00440 for a 5-litre bottle of conch hydrochloric or something. It's also very useful for putting in an actual T-nav, like I suggested earlier, as the entire nav cluster and even the modifier keys can be programmed. You can also remap the keys, even the locklight ones this time, to another key by pressing Remap, then the key you want to copy, and then the key you want to copy it to. You can do this several times in succession, and then when you're done, you finish and save by pressing Remap again. On the later versions, you need to have Control pressed when you press Remap to start, but this is one of the older ones where you don't need to do that. Overall, this kind of extended programmability is very useful. I've always been a great fan of macro keys, hence why I always have my Focus macro pad handy, so I can definitely recommend checking it out. Nowadays, many of the more upmarket gaming keyboards have macro capability, but they tend to require an outside software package. Almost invariably, it's horrible bloatware, bone-chillingly close to being a keylogger, while personally I prefer keyboard-side, on-the-fly programmability without any software dependence. Another quite useful feature is that you can temporarily suspend all programmed keys with the Suspend Macro key, which makes it behave exactly like it would if it wasn't programmed at all, and then when you press the key again it restores everything. You can also press Ctrl-Alt-Suspend to clear all programming immediately. Overall, in terms of programmability, I'd say the AnyKey rules supreme among the vintage battlecruisers, and it's definitely its best and most standout feature in my opinion. As for the switches, they are Maxi Switch dome width slider, which are one of the few dome width slider switches I haven't reviewed yet. They're quite stiff, possibly the stiffest rubber domes I've encountered so far, apart from those crazy BKE Redux domes, and honestly the weighting is a bit much for me. I'd have much preferred something lighter. It's the main reason I decided to not swap my office keyboard, which is a light linear Alps board, for this one actually. Otherwise, in the feels department, it's pretty decent. It's very tactile, and like any good dome with slider switch, feels fairly sharp for rubber domes. They are also MX mount, so if you want to deck it out with your preference of pimped plastic, you can. This is especially handy if you change a lot about the non-PF keys to better reflect your choice of layout, or to be able to stick on some religionables. Nice! That said, the board already comes with ABS double shots. Yeah, that's right, you'd be forgiven for thinking that they were lasered, but the lettering shot is just grey rather than black, and the font is rather thin. Still, double shots are nice. Something that came as a big surprise to me when I got the keyboard is the build quality, and specifically the weight, which I assume to be very light considering its innocent, plain looks, and the fact that it's a rubber dome keyboard. For example, one of those ultra-common HP horrors is about 800 grams, and the standard malformed Dell turd is not much over half a kilo, which is pretty pathetic for a full size. However, the AnyKey weighs as much as 1.75 kilos. That's several hundred grams more than a Corsair K70, Razer Black Widow, or a DAS keyboard. And remember, this is a rubber dome board as well. Impressive. The reason for this weight is a sturdy plastic case, as well as an exceptionally thick and heavy metal plate that the switches are mounted in. At 1.4 millimeters, it's thicker than even a Black Badge Model M's plate. So the build quality is pretty excellent. I'm quite sure you can cave someone's noggin in with this. Note also that Maxi Switch dome with slider uses a single membrane layer rather than the more common three, so it uses conductive pads under the rubber domes. You can also see some of the pad jumpers sticking out here. The back of the keyboard reveals a few stickers, a date stamp from 1992, a pair of somewhat large flip-out feet, and it uses a simple coiled cable with a 5-pin DIN plug. One weakness of the board is that it uses a small backspace key, which they did to make way for the big-ass enter. This is a common thing on big-ass enter boards, and it's a bit annoying because it's easy to miss-hit. However, because the board is reprogrammable, you can just rebind this key to backspace, so you have 2 single-unit backspaces, which alleviates the problem a bit, and in fact, this is how I used it for the majority of the testing period. There's a second slash key between the modifier keys anyway, so it's not a big loss or anything. Anyway, overall it's a really nice board, well made, and the programmability is excellent and not dependent on external software, unlike modern programmable keyboards. The switches aren't hugely my thing, but if you like stiff, very tactile rubber domes, they might suit you pretty well. That's it for this review. Thank you for watching, I hope you enjoyed it, and following is a typing demonstration of me typing on this keyboard.